Okay. Are we ready?
We are ready.
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this beautiful special edition of the Alliance Group podcast. And speaking of beautiful and special, I have Miss Irma Mospan from Five Rings Financial with us today in the studio and as a podcast guest. Irma, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome to Atlanta. This is your first visit to the Alliance Group office. You got the tour this morning. What did you think?
It's bigger than I thought. Yeah. There's a lot of rooms. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we have a pretty big operation, and Lee's already thinking of possibly expanding even more and knocking down a couple more walls. So it all is in the name of growth, which is what we're doing in Alliance Group. We just wrapped up another huge year here. And speaking of huge years, you had an enormous year in 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's, one thing I want to talk about on this podcast today and that we're going to go into is you have a truly incredible story of where you came from and how you are now one of the top producers in the country. So I want to walk the people who are listening, the people who might be watching this through that. We'll start at the beginning, Irma. You emigrated from Germany,
Yes.
18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You came to this country and didn't speak English.
Barely
Spoke just a little bit of English. Basically, the equivalent of a ninth grade education. You're here in this country. You're 18 years old. Obviously, a very tender age. Came here not knowing anyone.
Nope.
So, as an 18-year-old who comes to this country, not knowing the language, not knowing anyone, what was that like? What was that experience like? Can you go back and kind of describe what was going on in your 18-year-old head at that time?
Yeah, like even when you just say that, it makes my stomach a little like fuzzy, right? Because it brings me back to like what took place, what brought me here, right? So I want to kind of go back into why did I even come?
Sure.
You know, what would make someone pick up and leave their home at 18 years old and fly across the ocean and start a whole new life, right?
Yeah.
So my first experience with the United States was when I was 16, barely 16, and I wasn't allowed to go to school anymore. I was severely anorexic to the point of actually on my way to death. So, it was really a bad situation. My home was very broken. My family was broken. Go back right at that time, 1992, 93, anorexia wasn't known. I honestly didn't even know what was going on, and I fell into it really by means of having control for a situation I felt so out of control.
Right.
So fast forward 1994, I wasn't allowed to go to school anymore. My mom was desperate, and she had a friend in the state of Maine, and she basically talked to her about me, and this friend said, why don't you send her over here and we'll just see what we can do.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was in 1994, and I came. This family was a Russian family. My mom also grew up in Russia, so they maintained a friendship for all these years, and so you have to kind of think about coming from a different country. People think of America very different than what oftentimes it is. So I grew up watching Beverly Hills 90210, Melrose Place, you know. So when my mom said America, I'm like, yeah,
absolutely.
I'll go. Yeah, I'm going to go see like Brad Pitt and, you know.
Right.
And so this vision in my head at 15 at the time, I turned 16 when I came here, was way different than what I experienced. So I did say yes, made some promises. You know, when you're in an addiction and when you're sick, you will say anything to get you away. And I didn't plan on eating, but I said yes, I would.
Sure.
And so I came, and I landed in Boston, and then they picked me up. They ended up driving to Portland, Maine, into an immigration quarter, so to speak. They were just barely here themselves, and I thought I ended up in the third world. I was like, oh my gosh.
It's Maine. When you're expecting Beverly Hills and you get Maine, it's very different.
Right.
Maine is beautiful, but very different than Beverly Hills.
Yeah. So this was a super, super nice family. They only spoke Russian and, again, barely English themselves. So not only didn't I understand English, I also didn't know Russian.
Right.
And I just remember having a headache for 3 days. So, oh my gosh, I can't understand anything. I don't understand what they're saying. I was super, super depressed. But They were super nice, super sweet. And fast forward a month later, when I decided to stay for the summer because I enjoyed myself, I met my now husband back then. So it's a crazy, crazy, crazy story. And I don't want to go into all the details, but he said, he was 23 years old at the time. I was 16. He said, God gave him a vision when he was a young boy of this girl, and he said, when I saw you, that just became that matching mirror to this vision. And he knew back then that I would be his wife one day, and I was this broken bird. And so anyways, we met that summer. We ended up losing touch. Actually, we lost touch for over a year through completely miracle. I would say God's hand completely all over it. Reconnected. I came to see him when I was 17, so a year later. Again, barely knew the man, right? He ended up proposing. Wow. And I said yes. So we had to then do paperwork and all of that. I turned 18 in April and moved May 15th. And then July 6th, we were married.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
It's like a love story. Star-crossed lovers. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So now you're 18 years old when you move.
Yes.
Permanently.
Yes.
And are you still in Maine at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Tell me about this. So shortly after you're pregnant with your daughter, right?
My son.
Your son. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Notes were wrong there. And your first experience with sales, actually, your mother was in sales, correct?
Right.
And so your first instinct, as you described it, was, well, if I got to get a job. What can I sell? And your first sales job was Tupperware. So tell me about how you recruited yourself into the Tupperware industry.
Yeah, so I've always loved sales. Even back home in Germany, I was into selling jewelry, and I had an entrepreneur mind, I think, from the get-go. As I mentioned, never finished high school, so ninth grade, literally highest education. And when I came to Maine, I'm by nature a social butterfly. My husband is completely the opposite, and so I was craving people.
Right.
My in-laws love them to pieces. They're not super people focused either. So we were super poor on top of that. My husband immigrated from Russia when he was 19, so also no formal education.
Right.
So when we got married, he was fixing cars. That was his job, making I think $10, $15, no, $12 an hour maybe.
Yeah.
Then, we got pregnant. That was my dream of being a mom. And I knew I would never not want to raise my children. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do besides raising my kids? But I want to make some money. And I really wanted Tupperware dishes. We couldn't afford. So I remember when my mom got into sales and she sold everything under the sun, she would get these starter packs, right? Inexpensive. And so I vividly remember opening up the yellow pages and looking for a Tupperware anything. And there was actually an ad in there. Called the ad and got these two ladies showing up at my house. I was, I think, 7 months pregnant. Again, my English super broken.
Yeah.
No contacts. I don't know what I was thinking. But I wanted to succeed and I wanted to sell. And I learned a really big lesson that I hope people will take away from. I hope there's a few things people will take away, but this one is really important. Don't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
You see, I really did have a winning heart inside of me, but those ladies didn't see that. They saw my circumstances. They saw an immigrant girl, pregnant, no contacts, and
barely spoke English.
And so they were very happy to recruit me and sell me this big pack and take my credit card for it. But there was no help. There was no, let's rally together and help you. I showed up at the meetings. I felt alone. There was no one there to hold my hand. I remember asking this one gal that I met through being in sales at Motherhood. So before actually delivering Noah, I worked at Motherhood Maternity. I asked her if she would do a party for me, and she did get her family together. And this is the true story. I stood there, and I think maybe 5 minutes into it, I just started crying because I couldn't come up with the words I wanted to say. And I just stood there, and I just the tears were rolling. And they were all like, let's have snacks. And I'm like, that sounds good. And that was it. That was my experience. And then I just quit because no one was there to teach me, to hold my hand, to walk me through it.
Right.
But yet I still wanted
Yeah.
to succeed, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first experience, and it was really hard.
That's an incredible story. And again, it kind of it shows how far you've come. It's very surprising for me to hear that Irma Mospan was ever in a situation like that, where it's just, you bombed, right? Couldn't have gone worse. And so many people are tempted to quit.
Oh yeah.
At that point, right? Once you've hit that, a lot of people, when they have that experience, it's so tempting to just walk away and find something else. You obviously stuck with it, and you've had huge success, especially this past year. So from Tupperware, next you found your next sales role, which was with Creative Memories. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So Creative Memories, what were you selling there?
So Creative Memories at the time was a scrapbooking company, and so it was scrapbooking supplies and stickers and cutters and all that good stuff before digital.
Are you
learning
the digital world? Right? Are you learning the language a little bit better by this point? Or are you,
yeah,
and kind of getting a little bit better at your craft, right?
Well, yeah. So I mean, I had my kids. I still was not super. I didn't have any friends. There was one lady that became my absolute best friend still to this day. Her name is Mary Darling, and she invited me to a scrapbooking party. I was 9 months pregnant with Leia, so my second, and I was so excited that I was invited. Like, it was like the highlight of my whole, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was invited, So because it's really hard, like people don't realize how hard it is to come to a country and
establish yourself socially.
Because people have their lives, they have their families, they have their, and like, why would you care to invite this young girl, to be part of it? But she did. I think she invited all the ladies in the church. And I went, and the party actually cost $10 because the consultant gave up materials. And I thankfully didn't see that on the invitation because I wouldn't have gone because I didn't have the extra $10. So at the end, she collected the money, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do, right? So Mary paid for it. And I couldn't order anything. It was like, I loved everything, but I couldn't order anything. And Mary, at the end of the class, said, hey, who wants to scrapbook with me? Like, I would love to do this weekly. And I'm like, I'll do it, She had her sisters there, her friends. No one was really that interested. And I remember the next Tuesday came around, and she showed up, and I couldn't believe it. Like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Like, I know it makes me want to cry because she showed up for me. Yeah. And she's actually the reason that I would say, like, she's actually the reason why I am who I am today, because she started to believe in me and to really build me up. She helped me with grammar, and she would correct my English, and she was just so precious. She was there. And when I wanted supplies and I couldn't afford them, she said, why don't you sell it? Like, make some money and sell it. I'm like, sell to who? Like, you already have everything. You're my only friend.
Right.
But she ended up talking me into giving it a shot. And the story is, I had 3 people at my first party. So she actually lent me the $200 for the startup kit. And I got it, and I practiced. There were words I didn't even know what they meant, but I memorized them, and I would just practice and practice and practice. And I went to the town hall. There was one lady that was super sweet, and she would just be so kind when I register cars and whatnot, and her name was Ruth. And I asked her to come. Took me so much courage to ask. She brought her friend Teresa. I still remember all these names.
Yeah.
And Mary. So it was 3 people. And I just remember thinking, all I have to do is get them to fall in love with this product and the story so they can book a party and put me in front of more people. And I think that's really the key. No matter what business you start, if you can just wrap your brain around, I got to expose my message and not worry about the sale, right?
Right.
Like, share your story, connect with the people, figure out a way that they can fall in love with what you're doing, and then expose you to their circle of friends, because that's what happened to me. These 2 girls ended up booking each a party. And from that point forward, my whole focus, like when I would come home, Alex would be like, how much did you sell? I'm like, I booked 3 parties. Yeah. And he's like, how much did you sell? I'm like, I booked 4 parties, right? And that was my whole focus. My focus was booking, booking, booking. And then next thing you know, I mean, I'm at convention. I get to be actually on stage.
Wow.
And then, let's see, that was 2021. I think 2004, 2004, I ended up being the #1 salesperson in the whole country and the top recruiter at the same time, which is very rare because you're usually strong in one or the other.
Right, yeah.
So much so that I received a phone call from Forbes magazine, And they wanted a part of my story, and I didn't know who Forbes was.
You didn't realize how big of a deal that was.
I didn't know. And so I gave them my story, right? And I ended up calling Mary, right? And I'm like, this magazine called me, and it was Forbes. And she's like, you mean Forbes? And I'm like, that's what they said.
Forbes is what they said.
So yeah, if you Google my name, Irma Mospan Forbes, you will actually see the article. And,
oh my gosh.
And from that point on, I just kept focusing on exposure, right? Mm-hmm. And I had, 24 to 26 parties a month when the average consultant had 2 to 4.
Right.
But it was because I focused on exposure.
Yeah. It's, and the other thing that's incredible about that part of your story is the Marys, right?
Oh my gosh.
It seems that every successful person, when you sit down with them, they always fondly remember and are grateful for a Mary in their life, somebody who reached out to them and showed them kindness when they needed it the most and helped them, in some way through their personal life or in their career. I know that I've had several Marys, Jerry Stratton, definitely one of them, Lee Duncan, another one of them, and I guarantee that Lee could list out a few Marys of his own, and it's important for all of us to remember to be a Mary.
Yes.
Right? And pay that forward,
yeah,
and help somebody else.
You never know. You never know with that one invitation that you could change someone's life forever.
Or that one act of kindness, it might seem small to you, but it might mean the world to somebody who's in a position like you were in. So you've experienced huge sales success. From there, you move on to other companies, Mayaluka, mm-hmm. right? Mayaluka, right? At some point, you're experiencing a lot of success, but you're kind of developing what you would describe as workaholic habits.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it sounds like I can see how you get there from the way that you described booking 26 parties a month. At some point, it becomes a lot, and you find that you're having success, but you're not happy. Mm-hmm. Why weren't you happy?
Oh gosh, there's like so many things I can think of, but I think one thing is so when I started Create Memories, mm-hmm. my goal was to pay for Noah's preschool. Back then it was $84 a month. Imagine.
Wow, I would take that.
Right? And I wanted to pay for our family to go out to eat once a month because we couldn't afford it. So that was like my big why, right? And I made good money selling products, but it was a company that really didn't support the growth of an individual. So I realized after 5.5 years, I'm never going to get to the top where that true residual income would happen. So I was always starting at zero, always making the sale and all of that. But what I've learned, and I've seen this unfortunately in a lot of entrepreneurs, when you have a why or a goal and all of a sudden your focus moves from that to becoming addicted to the recognition, mm-hmm. right? And wanting to earn that next trip, that next trophy, that happened to me. Mm-hmm. I went from, and I think it had a lot to do with the emptiness in my own heart and my life that I was just filling with other things all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Because when you become successful, it doesn't matter what company you're in, you get the spotlight. And I think that can do good, but I think it can also do a lot of harm if you're not really settled in who you are, mm-hmm. right? I struggled with my faith at the time. I really let that limelight get to me, and I craved it, and it was like you had 9 months to earn the trip, and I'm like, can I do it in a month, right? And so all of a sudden,
just amping up the
right,
expectations on
myself,
yourself,
right? And so all of a sudden, it wasn't anymore about paying for preschool and paying for my family. It became, what's the next trophy? What's the next title, right? And mm-hmm. what's the next competitor I can beat? And even though I think most people lie to themselves and say, oh, that's not that important. Oh, I'm not going for it.
Right.
I think if we're all really honest, and if you've experienced success, to some level, we've all gone through that. Yep. And I realized that I was shoving my kids to the side. I know this will make me cry, but it's the truth, mm-hmm. And I wasn't like really, I wanted to work from home and I wanted to have this career from home to be a stay-at-home mom, but I really was finding myself actually seeing my kids almost as a bother.
Yeah.
Because I was so wrapped up in the success and you know what I was experiencing through that, and
addicted to
yes,
to the success, to the recognition, to the achievement.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I think especially if you have an addictive personality to begin with, and that's definitely something that I have struggled with. It's very easy, even with good things, you can feel that, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember
Exercise and things like that.
all of it. And in 2006, I had my really big faith crisis, I would say, and you know, that's another whole story, but it's where I really just had what I would call my carpet moment, and I fell to the floor, and I just really challenged God to basically show up in my life and prove himself to me if he's really real. And that really changed my world in a big way, because I started to align again what's my purpose and how he's blessed me with this success, but also don't lose sight of what really matters.
Yeah.
And that is my children, my marriage, my family. So yeah, and that made me also rethink what do I do with Creative Memories at the time, right? And then I moved into another business, but I had a lot more growth, personal growth, and I had more experience.
Yeah.
And so that really did help me just change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty, it's incredible to be able to recognize that something wasn't right, even though everything was going right on the professional side. There's that emptiness that can be created when you focus too much on and you get away from things like family.
And you get burnouts, you know, and I think people like oftentimes will fight it, and then they experience adrenal fatigue, which is really hard to come out of, you know, and then you like spend 9-12 months into that, and then you get better, and then you just right back at it if you don't take the time to examine what brought me here, right? Because at the end of the day, if you ever sit with someone that's about to cross over into the next life, I don't think they will talk about their trophies or how much they were number one, or they'll say, I wish I had one more year to become, you know, number one. No, it's always going to be family, friends, right? The things that really matter. And for me, I lost sight of that. I really did.
Yeah.
So
it's I'm glad that you were able to recognize that and to so you do you take a step back at that point and kind of reconnect with family? I know that at this point we're not in Myluca yet. Am I saying that correctly? Melaleuca.
Yes.
I was just leaving out a
It's
syllable.
all right.
So at some point you move back to Germany, right? With Melaleuca. You're wanting to open. They want you to open a new branch, basically. You have that experience, but you eventually find yourself where you are now, which is McKinney, Texas.
Yes.
Someone who's been all over. You've been to Maine. You've been to, Germany, obviously, and you find yourself in McKinney, Texas. What is it that you love about McKinney, Texas, that makes you and your husband say this is the place for us?
Yeah. So when we moved to Germany to basically help launch Melaleuca there, we stayed for 2 years, from 2012 to 2014. And it was probably the most challenging 2 years of our lives. Our marriage, we actually almost lost our marriage. And again, work and loss of focus and all of that.
This is in a way a homecoming for you. I imagine your expectations might have been like, oh, this might be great. Yeah. And it wasn't quite the experience.
I think it was like, because I was still dealing with a lot of hurt from my own past. And I think in my mind, I never really like healed in certain areas. It was like my 18-year-old self came back home, right? And they were my siblings, and now I'm going to have this perfect family. Well, that didn't happen, right? And so anyways, I think for me, it was good that I experienced that, because in my mind, I always struggled with let's move back and let's experience living in Germany. My husband was like, no, this is not where we want to be. And so I did. And it was good in one way, but also very challenging. And I also realized really quickly that in socialism, you cannot succeed the way that you can succeed in a country like the United States. Same company, same compensation plan, but yet when the government isn't in favor of you to succeed, and they tax you at every single corner that you take, I was blown away. Like, I never lived as an adult there, right? And now I got to experience it, and I thought, this is insanity, right? But we stayed. We were hoping really hard that we would bring this opportunity to my family, and we did. We worked hard. We got some success. Our kids loved it. But we knew it was time to go in 2014, and we knew we didn't want to go back to the Northeast. Never liked the cold. So we were actually just talking to one another, and we said, why don't we check out Texas? And so we ended up flying into Dallas. We got it on a rental car, and we just drove around, and we prayed a lot, and we drove through McKinney, and we just like, this feels right. This feels like a safe place. And so here I'm doing this now all over again. Don't know anybody. Yep. Just completely. But you have that. But I have a skill set now. Yes. Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've got experience now. I have a skill set I developed. And so in the fall of 2014, we settled in McKinney, and start a whole new life there.
And you immediately start about the process of networking.
Yes.
And finding this new sandbox that you're in, right?
Yes.
So tell me about that. How do you, brand new, don't know anybody, at least you know the language this time.
Yes.
But how do you start over? And, those experiences that you had before are now informing you as you try to do this again. I imagine you're a lot better at networking this time.
Yeah, so I never networked before. It was really like I always built, like with going back to Creative Memories, right? It was booking parties. So that was pretty easy. You kind of like, as long as you did good with booking, you always had business. And then I had a huge customer base. I mean, over 1,000 plus customers I serviced. And so took that into Melaleuca. So I was able, because of relationship, right?
Right.
But now I'm in Texas, and I'm like, we literally don't know anyone. And so the very first, I think the first 6 months, my husband and I, what we did is we got dressed professionally, and we would go to like furniture stores and Costco, anywhere where we knew people would actually work on commission base, and we would strike up a conversation. And what's really cool is
with the sales
people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And so our goal was to strike a conversation. I learned the skill of asking questions, and don't talk about yourself, but just ask. And people will give you anything you want to know. It's pretty incredible, right? And so we would lead then at the end with, hey, we just moved here. We were shopping around for furniture. We're expanding our business, and we're looking for a certain type of people, motivated, experienced in sales. They want to make an extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Do you know of anyone? Well, most everyone goes, well, what is it? I'm like, hey, could we treat you to a cup of coffee and just share with you what we do? And maybe for you, may not be for you, but you may know somebody. No one said no.
That's incredible.
Literally, we were just like, and every day we would go out, and then someone said, hey, you may want to go to networking group. I'm like, networking group, what is that? Right? And so I was invited to a networking group, and that changed everything. And so same thing, just being present, not talking about yourself. But my goal was, how many business cards can I collect? And then invite them to a cup of coffee and just share what we do and who do they know who they can connect me to. Yeah. And it was a great experience.
And you built a very large book of business there. There in McKinney. So kind of taking a little side road here, and it was right about this time, you always say you needed to figure out what made your heart beat, and you always encourage your listeners and people who follow you to figure out what makes their heart beat, because you think that is how you find true happiness and overall success, right? So what do you mean by figuring out what makes your heart beat?
Yes. So in 2016, when we had come back in 2015, we actually started an adoption process. We adopted a couple of kiddos from Ukraine, teenagers. So I was very much involved in the adoption community and the hosting program from Ukraine and all of that. And I still wasn't super, super focused on growing my business. I mean, I was enrolling customers and all, but there wasn't like this huge growth.
Right, because you had purposefully taken a little bit of focus away from profession and make sure you're making room for family and things like that.
So 2016, in our business at the time, we were faced with a really big challenge. It was a business challenge. It was 250 business partners invited, and the CEO basically offered us this huge financial reward if we would do a certain activity.
Called a Quest Challenge?
Quest Challenge,
Right.
yeah. And I was, my business was pretty flat. I mean, like I said, I maintained, we had great residual income, but it wasn't like at this massive growth.
Right.
And I knew that if I was to accept this challenge, things would have to change, and I would have to do things a little bit different, actually a lot different. And so by accepting this challenge, I remember so vividly in the hotel room, it was in Colorado, and I just went into prayer because it was scary. Like, you had to perform a certain way, or you had to like pay back your airfare and hotel. I mean, it was really like, it wasn't just like, yay, I want to do this, right?
Right.
It was like, hey,
They
we're
asked
gonna,
for some skin.
yes,
Yeah.
skin in the game.
Yeah.
So Alex, my husband, always supported me, always been like, anything you want to do. And this challenge wasn't going to be an easy challenge. Like, it was definitely something like, okay, we got to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And I just remember praying. I went into just the hallway, and I just like, okay, God, like, can I do this again? Am I able to do this again, right? And I had this conversation with God. And I don't know if you've ever heard his whisper and his voice, but it was like we were having a conversation, and I felt him say, listen to your heartbeat. What did I create you for? Because the challenge in business, and it doesn't matter what business you're in, if you see top performers and you're sitting in the audience, oftentimes we think we have to do what exactly they do, right? And they give us, where they go to network or where they find their clients. And then we think, oh, if I just go and do this, right? And I fell into that trap because there was a top performer in the business, and she was really big into the gym and working out. And I was like, okay, let's go get a gym membership. And we did, right? And I remember thinking, even my drive to the gym, I hate this.
Right.
I don't want to be in the gym. I don't like the gym. I'm an outdoor person. I like the outdoor nature workout type of thing. But I would do it because I thought to be successful, you have to do that.
Mimic what that person
exactly doing. Right. And so what the Lord was teaching me in that moment was, what makes your heart beat? Find your sandbox.
Right.
Well, in that place in my life, I was really heavily invested into the adoption community. And I thought, I don't have to go to the gym. There's plenty of adopting families that need funds, right? That need an extra $20,000, $30,000 to make this adoption come true. There's families that want to host that need $3,000. So what if I just reach out to these families? I get chills just thinking about it, and just ask them, hey, are you open to taking a look what I do? And I could partner with you and help you. And so the Lord said, find your heartbeat, do that, and stop looking to the right and left. Wow. Just do what I created you for. And in my heart of heart, what I know, what my fibers of my heart is to help people. And it's not a cliche thing, I want to help you. Literally, if I can't help people, I don't find joy in it. Yeah. I'm not motivated by a number on the paycheck. I'm not motivated by the trophies anymore. I got that all taken care of, and chuck that, right?
Right.
That wasn't a motivator anymore. And it's like, I have to go to sleep at night knowing I made a difference in someone's life. And I said yes to the challenge. I knew right then and there, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it the way that really God wants me to do this. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it means.
And so, so this Quest Challenge, you did it.
Oh my gosh, didn't we do it? Yes. I knew I had to make some massive, massive changes. I fought these changes for years. At that point, I was already into reading and learning from other leaders. And it doesn't matter what book you read about being successful, whether it is, forming habits or, building a massive organization, communicating. There is a thread through the voices of these successful people that say the same thing. And I read them, but boy, did I fight it. I'm a free spirit. I don't like people telling me what to do. And so there were certain things that I knew, if I'm going to do this and I want to be successful at it, and I can't lose myself again, I'm going to have to follow some principles from the wise people that have gone before me.
Right.
And I decided, so this was January 2016, and I said to myself, 1 year. We have this 1 year for this Quest Challenge. If I'm just going to do this for 1 year, let's see what happens.
Wow.
And I did.
And you committed.
I committed to all these different
We'll see where we're at the end of the year and see how I
Mm-hmm.
liked it, but I'm committing no matter what. I'm going to do it for 12 months.
Yes.
Wow. So what were those things? What were some of those things that you had to commit to that you did not want to do? I know exactly what you're talking about. Like successful people, they do this thing. They wake up super early, or they work out every single day, and they do this and they do that, and they journal and they do all this stuff. It's all that stuff that
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do. So what are some of those things, those big changes?
Yes, I can tell you
made in that
exactly
year?
what they were. Okay, so the first thing that I learned from all these successful people was they have an early morning. Like I don't think there's a single book I read where they're like, I sleep in and I
Right.
just start my day whenever I feel like it.
We hear about
So-
the 5 a.m. club and things like that.
Yeah. So one thing that I struggled with really bad was hitting the snooze button. I mean, and I thought about it for years, honestly, like I'm going to stop it, right? But I never did. So, and I learned through some of these books, like what you actually need to do in order to form new habits, right? So the very first thing I said, this is it. I'm making a decision that I will never hit the snooze button again. So what was different this time? Number one, I had a reason, right? I had a real purpose, right? You will never change a habit unless you get a real purpose behind it, because as a nutrition practitioner, I studied health in the body. Your brain is wired for comfort. Okay. Over 30% of your calories that are being spent throughout the day go to the brain. And so the brain will fight any change because it will take energy. It wants to go on autopilot as much as possible. You probably don't remember getting dressed this morning and driving into the office. You don't, because like, how did I get here, right? So the brain actually physically wants to preserve as much as possible from energy because it takes so much energy. So anytime you want to learn something new or change a habit, it takes active calories
from the
to
brain.
burn, and it creates new neuropaths. So you have to know this before you want to make a change. And a lot of people don't, and they think, oh, I'm such a failure, I can't do it. You have to actually understand what goes on in your brain. So that's number one. You have to have a real purpose for the change, right? Also, you need accountability. I really believe that without accountability, it's almost impossible to make a change. So on my team, I asked on my team call, hey, who wants to quit hitting the snooze button? Who wants to be my accountability partner? This gal, Deanna, said, I'm in. I barely knew her, right? And I said, okay, so we're going to set our goal for what time. For me at the time, it was 5 a.m. And when the alarm goes off, I have to text you, beat the snooze. And then once I do that, I can go back to bed, right? It's an honor system. And she said, okay, I'm all in. And we did. I mean, for months and months. And believe it or not, Sam, I never hit that snooze button again. Not like never, ever, but like, actually, I don't remember the last time I did. I mean, like, I just don't. The other thing you have to do to prep your brain is you have to speak positivity into your new activity. So before you actually go to bed, I would tell myself, I am so excited to get up at 5 a.m. I'm going to be energized. It's going to be a great day. You will not believe that those words carry power. And you actually begin to believe that, and your actions will follow your belief always. Okay. You can also not wait for the emotional part of it to make a change, because you have to have action and emotions will follow. It's a huge, huge part of it, because people wait for the right time when I feel like it. No, the good feeling comes after you do the action. So that was the first thing. The next thing was I was committing to actually writing out my goals. That was a big one. I fought that so hard. Like the gal that had introduced me to the business, she would always say, what's your goal? I just gave it to her just to like, these are my goals. Did I write them down? No. Did I look at them? No. It was just words out in the wind, right? So I began to very purposefully write out my goals. Income goal, growth goals. I mean, anything I could think of, write it down. The next thing I did was I decided to become accountable. So I created accountability sheets and track my activity. And what I learned so valuable in that task was that you cannot coach emotions. You can only coach actual data. And I started actually putting that into practice with my team, and I still do that today. If somebody comes to me and says, you know, it's not working, or I've done all of this stuff and no results, I will ask them, show me your data. Because so often when we feel defeated, and people will say this, you know, everyone I called today said no. Or you know what, everybody says this. I'm like, okay, so let's talk about everybody. Can you give me some names? And oftentimes when we break it down to actually data and we take the emotions out of it,
Right.
it was two people,
Right.
right? Oh, I worked all day and I got nothing accomplished. Like, okay, did you think about your business or what did you actually do? So let's talk about the data, right? How many phone calls did you make? How many people did you actually talk to? How many rejections did you actually get? Because you can get 10 yeses and you get one no and you think everyone said no,
Yep.
right? Because again, that's where we're wired at. So being very purposeful about data. The next thing I decided to do was calendar my calendar, like do time blocking. Be very, very focused on, and that's something I learned from all these books was if you don't prioritize your family and the things that matter in your life, you will lose them. You will. There's no way people will stick around for a workaholic forever, just like an alcoholic or drug addict is no different. No money is going to keep a marriage together. I decided to follow very closely the Sabbath and really do, again, what I learned in the Bible and not just read it, but say we're going to take off the Sabbath and rest and let my brain refresh and my body refresh and work for 6 days. That was hard for me to do, right? Because I'm by nature a workaholic. Let's see, what else did I do? So accountability, writing out goals, getting up early. Oh, and then be very, very good about my morning routine, meaning I get up that early for purpose, right? So I'm going to get up and I do my prayer and my Bible reading and my gratitude journal. And then I would read for 1 hour a book, a leadership book, a growth book. And then I would take notes from that. And at 8 a.m., I would actually every day coach my team on what I learned. And I did this for, obviously the year, but I've done that for years now. Because the best way for you to grow is to teach, right? Reading is one thing, but then when you actually teach it, more than 80% will retain.
Yeah, we say that all the time here, and I 100% agree with that. The best way to learn sometimes is to teach.
Right.
It's pretty incredible.
The other thing that I focused on was physical and emotional wellness. So meaning stop your workday at a decent time and don't just carry it into the night, and then go to sleep at a decent time. People say, and I used to pride myself, honestly, I only need 5 hours of sleep. And I would be up until the wee hours and I realized, again, reading these books and learning about the body, and no, you're actually shortening your life. Like, yeah, you might do this, but, the stress factors go up, your health will be challenged. And so I decided I'm not just going to get successful or become successful. I want to live a long life.
Yeah. Be
healthy. I started to prioritize sleep, which was also really strange for my body.
Right.
And then I decided to get physically active, like walking, make sure that I have movement and not just sit all day and work and get my body to the point where I'm going to get sick. And then what's the purpose of that?
Right.
So
it's an incredible transformation that you went through.
Oh, my word.
So at the end of this year, you just carried that into the rest of your life.
Well, the crazy thing was coming into the challenge, I was really an underdog. Like I said, we came from a very flat business. I was the first out of the 250 to actually achieve the challenge. We had a year to achieve it. I had it achieved by April.
Wow.
And then overall for the whole challenge at the end of the year, I came in as number 2. So, and the only thing I changed, because my skill set was already there. Right. I knew how to set appointments. I knew how to present. I knew how to recruit. All that was already there. I'd proven it, right? What I changed was my routine and my commitment to doing it the right way. And so after that 1 year, we had more than doubled our income. We were able to pay for our kids' education, college education. We paid cash for it. The following year, just to continue on my why and figuring out my why, we paid off our mortgage in 11 months. We did everything just went, 10X. You ever heard of the book 10X, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that I felt like everything in my life was just going 10X because I followed, not because I was so smart to figure it out.
Right.
I just finally decided.
You just finally took the advice you'd been hearing from leaders for years.
Why read and not do it, right?
Right.
Why go to conferences and listen to what successful people do and then not put it into practice?
That seems so simple. Why read it and then not do it, right? It seems so simple.
Right.
Yes. Speaking of which, you do credit 3 books with changing your life. So The Power of Focus, The Speed of Trust, and The Power of Habit. These are 3 books that, I challenged you. Obviously, you did a lot of reading
Oh my goodness.
through this Quest Challenge and then, since. But those are the big 3. Would you say these are the 3 that helped you find those habits that you wanted to carry on
Yes.
throughout the Quest Challenge and afterward?
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, and I can think of so many more books. I mean, just even sitting here,
Sure,
the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership and so many more. But yeah, I would say those are, if somebody says, hey, what books should I read to change my life? I would say you're pretty well set with those books. And
Power of Focus, Speed of Trust, Power of Habit. All right. Well, you guys making notes hopefully there if you're listening and watching. So tell me how you come across your current opportunity is with a group that's very special to us, 5 Rings Financial, Alliance Group's #1 group as far as production. And you absolutely killed it this year. #2, I believe. And it's pretty nuts what you've done and how you've grown, the trajectory of your career. How long ago did you come into 5 Rings Financial? And tell me the story about how you got involved with what is now, a company that you are just doing an amazing job with.
Thank you. I was actually sincerely surprised at the conference when they said #2. I'm like, what? Because
amazing.
I'm still trying to figure this thing out, right? But yeah, so kind of how I was introduced to 5 Rings. Again, being successful, being an entrepreneur, coming though from socialism, communism, poor backgrounds, right? My husband and I were never taught about money. Like, I joke, I say we weren't taught about sex and money, and it's kind of important to teach,
Right.
the principles of both. Okay.
Right.
So when I turned 40, this is like almost 6 years ago, I remember just waking up, again, massive success, we're making money, everything is great. And I just remember waking up with this little like pressure on my chest, like, oh my gosh, we're getting older and we don't have a plan. Like, that's all I could think of. We don't have a plan. We don't have retirement. We had like basic life insurance. We always believed in that, but we don't have a plan. And I told, Alex, I'm like, hey, we need to figure this out. What's crazy to me is that in all of my years of being an entrepreneur, I have never had one person approach us about.
That's crazy.
Never. I mean, as
we
public
hear it
as
all the
we've
time.
been, right?
Yep.
And so, and I think people prejudge and think people are like,
She has it all together.
They've got
I'm
it all
sure
together. Yeah. So living in the Dallas area, we decided to go and visit financial advisors, and we will sit with anything that is about money.
Right.
And it's funny, when you start looking for it, they appear, right? It's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Right.
But what we figured out in that process, and I think we were like 4 or 5 months into it, that we're very conservative when it comes to money. Like, my husband and I are very safe. And so what they projected for us when it comes to like stock market and giving you money to a financial advisor, and they just, do their thing with your money, I did not like that idea. At this point, I'm like, I want to understand it. I want to know, and I want to go into it understanding what's going to happen with my money.
Right.
So I was a little discouraged, actually, and we're like, maybe we'll just keep the money under the mattress after all,
Wow.
At this point, like I said, we paid off our mortgage and
Yeah.
just didn't know what else to do. We were invited to a Money 101 class, and I actually almost didn't go because it sounded so like, Money 101. Okay, we know how to make money, right?
This is 5 Rings Financial's seminar.
Yes.
That they do that teaches people how money works.
Exactly.
And as the name suggests, the basics.
Right.
Right.
But, and this is the true story, it was a free dinner. We were overdue for a date night.
There you go.
And we went, right? And we were lucky enough that night Mike Wilk was in town.
Oh, that is lucky.
Basically started his Money 101.
Yeah, Mike Wilk, the founder of 5 Rings,
Yes.
and the guy that created this Money 101
Yes.
presentation that 5
Yes.
Rings Financial now does all
Phenomenal.
over the country.
Yeah. So
you got a great presenter.
we
that
got a
night.
great presenter, yes. And so I remember just sitting there very guarded. And 15 minutes into it, no joking, I pinched Alex and I said, I think we found what we're looking for. I got so excited about everything. I never heard of IULs. I never heard of living benefits. I never heard of generational wealth built through insurance. Like, never heard of it. And I'm like, where has this been, right? I mean, they didn't have to ask me to like, you know, or hunt me down for an appointment. I'm like, when can we meet, you know? So we did. It was, so this is like 2018. Yes, 2018. So we end up setting up everything. Our own tax-free retirement account, our kids, new life insurance with living benefits. I mean, and we end up doing actually an estate planning after that. Like, because again, we're just like really in a place of like, let's do this,
Let's get all of our ducks in a row. Right.
So we did, and we felt good, and that was it. I was like, perfect. If I run into someone, I'll just send them, you know, send them that way.
Yeah.
3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago, January, my niece, who was 23 at the time, lost her husband in a tragic car accident. Oh. They had a 4-month-old baby, and, you know, who at 23 plans their life, right? So you can imagine what that looks like. If they had a 4-month-old little boy, and she ended up, you know, having to move back home with her parents. We went to the funeral, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, what's going to happen to her?
Yeah.
Her husband had like a minor life insurance, but nothing to set her up for basically going on with her life. 4 weeks later, my husband's cousin, 42 years old, dies of a sudden heart attack, leaves his wife and 8 children behind. Gosh. So we fly to that funeral. And at that funeral, because we were there for a few days, I actually start asking questions to family members like, hey, if this was you, how would, you know, would your wife be okay? And what I found that most of them had no life insurance. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually a problem. Yeah. So I remember telling Alex, I think that we need to connect all these people to the 5 Rings education and all of that, and went home and talked to the gal that introduced me to 5 Rings, and she actually said, why don't you become an agent? I'm like, no, I'm already doing my business and I have no desire of doing anything else. Right. But Alex could do this. So I'm like signing my husband up for the task, right?
Your husband's like, huh?
Yeah. And so like kicking and screaming, he gets licensed, right? And you got to know my husband.
Yeah.
The most amazing guy, hands-on, not in front of people. Like, he's definitely not your people person. He doesn't like to talk
butterfly.
people.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Like, God really had a humorous day when he connected the two of us. But I mean, he does it, right? Because he's trying to figure out what to do with his life, and maybe this is. And I'm like, hey, I hope we can do this together. Right. Well, he has his first appointment with Christina and me right there with them. And after the appointment, I'm paraphrasing, he looks at me and says, I'd rather die than do this. Again, no joke, right? And
it's not for everyone.
No, and I'm
especially if you're not a people person who enjoys talking to strangers.
Right, and I'm sitting there like so crushed. Yeah. Because I'm like, what do you mean we're not? Like, no, we're going to do this. Yeah. So I'm like, you have the license. I'll just funnel people through it and we'll just figure this out, right?
Right.
Well, 3-4 months later, Five like, Irma, you really need to get licensed if you're going to be like that involved,
right.
And I'm like, dang it. So I do. I decide to get licensed because I see the need.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm at this point way sold. Like, there's a need here, and this doesn't interfere with my other business. If anything, it complements already what I do.
So many people need this basic financial education, and just to start, get those ducks in a row.
Yeah. I know so many people have made so much money, and they blow it. They don't know. And thankfully, we didn't blow our money, but still, like,
I wish we were. Not only blowing it, but it's all at risk.
Yes.
And you could spend a little bit of it protecting all of it, right?
Yeah. So I basically get licensed. That's in April. It will be 2 years. So it's not even been quite 2 years yet.
That's crazy.
And what I do at that point is remember what I said early, right? Every single opportunity I went through, I chose to learn and not look back with regret or feeling defeated. And I always take that, okay, now I have another skill and I have another skill. And so that skill set I developed when I went through that Quest challenge, right? What I decided to do for myself, I just carried it forward. And at that point, they were doing Money 101 like once a month, and I thought that's not going to happen. Like, right. And I know people all over the country, and
you were like, I need to do this more.
I need to do this more, and
more often. Yeah.
And I've been in the presentation business for now, decades.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn the skill set. I'm going to go ahead and do my own Money 101s online on Zoom.
And, I've developed a following on social media, and I just put the little bug out there, like, the class. And so I started having a lot of attendance. And again, what served me well was not looking to the right, not looking to the left, continuing to listen to my heartbeat.
Yeah.
I want to serve the families. I want to help people. And that's what I did. And so when I started, I was invited very early on to the Alliance Academy, and I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. And Jack said, yeah, you're one of our top. And I'm like, what? Like, really? Okay, great, right? So I went, and again, not really being sold into building a career. As a matter of fact, what I loved when I looked at Five Rings, I looked at the compensation plan, and I asked Christina, like, do you have to recruit to make the most money? And she said, no, you can either do it on personal all the way, or you can do recruiting. I'm like, that's music to my ears, because I didn't want to recruit. I just wanted to serve the people.
Just wanted to help.
I wanted to help, and I wanted to give this opportunity to other families. And so, so I just did, and I just did a lot of it. And I, earned the trip last year with you guys. Yeah. And again, being on stage and all of that. And I was like, okay, this is really strange, right? But I think because I focus on the power of one, which is, scheduling one appointment every day, looking at the daily versus like this massive year, right?
Little bits at a time.
Right. And I just ran my own race. I wanted to get to Black Jacket because that pays me the most commission. I want to be compensated for the time I'm spending away from my family.
Sure.
So to me, that just made sense. Yep. And that's what I did. I put just blinders on and booked appointments and worked really hard. And
really used a lot of this that you learned from doing that Quest Challenge, right? As far as
100%
daily activity.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You want to help this many people, set a goal, break it down to daily activity. What do I have to do every day? You have one thing that is what you call a non-negotiable, right? Tell me about your one non-negotiable every day that you have to do no matter what every single day.
Schedule one new appointment every day.
Just schedule one new appointment.
It sounds so simple.
It's non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable.
Which I think is the key to that, right? It's not like, oh, I tried, but I got a phone call and then I got distracted and then I had a kid practice. So I'll just do 2 tomorrow to make up for it. It is non-negotiable. You do not go to bed until it's done.
Right. And if for whatever reason it doesn't happen, because there are days, I have a family, I got grandkids.
Sure.
There are days where probably today I might not schedule an appointment, although I do have a few that I can follow up with at 2 p.m.
There you go.
Because I have a break, between 2 and 3.
You do. We're going to give her one break today.
Right, and I'll report back to you if I schedule it.
There you go.
But
accountability.
Right. But for me personally, and this is just, again, you can apply this to any business. And that's why for me it was easy to take the skill set that I chose to learn in 2016 and just transfer it. And I can go to another company and be just as successful.
Yep.
And I know that because I've developed that skill set, right?
You can succeed in any environment you find yourself.
Anything, right? And I think that's what, if people really like wrap their brain around that, it becomes you. Like Five Rings is a great opportunity and it's a place for me to become successful, but it's whether or not I take my skill set and apply it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important when you realize that you have to grow yourself before you can grow a team. Then all of a sudden you know what you need to do. Well, the power of one to me made so much sense. And again, I did that in my other business. If I want to grow my income, which is at the end of the day, why we're all doing this. There's no one here just out of pure charity, right?
Right.
We all do this because we want a better life. We have goals to reach. And when we get to do that while helping people, that's even more amazing. But if I want to grow my business, I have to have exposure. That's it. I mean, I can be the best presenter. I can be the best closer. But if I don't have exposure,
it goes all the way back to your Tupperware days where you weren't focused on making sales. You were focused on booking
appointments.
That
was with Creative
events,
Memories. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, Creative Memories. Sorry.
Yeah, Tupperware was a flop. But anyways, my point is
that also is something you brought up earlier that I want to make sure that we touch on. Is you just said Tupperware was a flop, right? It was a failure, but you don't regret that experience.
No.
Because that experience is what taught you what you needed to learn to go.
You know what it taught me?
It
didn't kill me.
Right?
I mean, that moment, I will never, I can still see the faces standing there with my big belly with the dish and wanted to say so much, but unfortunately none of them spoke German, right? And so, and if it had been in German, I probably could have done a lot better.
Right.
But when that happened and I went home that night, I mean, disappointed and all, but it didn't kill me. And you know what? The next day, those gals probably didn't think much more about it. I wasn't the focus of their thoughts. And I think when we realize that we're not all that important, you know, I think we make ourselves the center of the universe so often. And people tell themselves, oh, you know, what is this person going to think?
Oh, man,
what are they going to think?
Right.
Why do you care? I mean, honestly, like I'm asking this question, like, you know,
right.
Why do you care what anybody thinks? If you have an honorable profession, which we do, and we help people, and if someone doesn't see the value, why do you care? Are they paying your bills? Are they writing your resume? Right? Are they writing it? No. At the end of the day, when you're done with that approach, I can promise you, if somebody tells you no, within 5 minutes, they don't even remember they did that. And yet we give them so much power in our brain to talk us off the cliff.
Yeah. That's funny.
You know, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. If you can look yourself in the mirror and you can look at your spouse and your family, that's really all that matters, right?
Yeah. And so anyways, going back to the power of one, why is that so important? If I have my focus on that and I schedule one new appointment a day, that's not a follow-up, that's not an appointment to write an application. It's one new exposure, meaning I have made one person say yes to come to my class, Wine, Women, and Wealth, Money 101, one-on-one with me, and new exposure, right? Then I know that my list of pool is just getting bigger, right? The other thing it does when you do that, when somebody reschedules or cancels, which happens, it doesn't throw you off the rail. Because you know you have another one, and you have another one, and you have another one.
Yep.
And so you just, and I'll show that later when I go through my calendar and the flow system and all of that.
Sure. We're going to do a whole training on that,
right?
On Irma's system here.
And it's so basic. Like when you ask me to show that, I'm like, I hope it's not like too basic, right? But it works. But it comes down to the activity, right? And when you focus on something, it's amazing how your brain will actually lead you in that direction.
You call it the power of one, right?
One a day.
Just one a day. And, you know, simple, you say that as it's a negative. I think simple and effective is the best anything can be, right?
Right.
As long as something it is effective, it's worth looking at. And the more simple it is, the more applicable it is, the easier it is for people to actually follow. So we're really looking forward to some of this content that we're going to film with you today.
The other thing it does, it removes this huge burden of this massive goal.
Complex.
Right? And somebody might say, okay, I want to earn, $150,000 a year. Well, if you don't break it down to actually daily activity and you write it down, like I said, I can't even believe I'm teaching on this because I used to fight it so hard, so hard, right? But now I've experienced it year after year after year after year. And I promise anyone that does it, you will never go back because you have a sense of accomplishment. You feel good. You have structure, right? And I think by nature, we need that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it gives you really just something to look forward to, and you do your business without stress. And I think that's the greatest reward. Absolutely.
So Irma, if somebody that's watching this, listening to this, wants to get in touch with you, whether it's just to have a conversation with you, to talk about their retirement situation, maybe their life insurance, or even a potential career with you at Five Rings Financial, how can they get in touch with Irma Mospan?
So what's really cool is I have a unique name.
Yes.
If you Google me, if you go to social,
if
you go to social media and you put in IRMA.
There's not many Irma Mospans out there.
Actually, there isn't another one. It's the craziest. There really isn't another one.
It's so fantastic for your Google results.
So it's pretty simple to find me, right? So the easy way, I'm super active on Facebook. You can find me there and message me. Obviously, my phone number, 469-789-7200.
667-0454.
We're going to put that on the screen.
Perfect. And then my email is my first and last name, so irmamospan@gmail.com. But yeah, like seriously, if you just go to any social media outlet or Google, you'll find me.
Well, you can be Irma's one for one day. The power of
Oh
one.
yeah. Say, hey, I want to be your one.
I want to be your one.
Yes.
Irma, really looking forward to all this great content. Thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. It's an amazing American success story. The American dream sitting right here, personified in you. Congratulations on such an amazing career, an amazing story, an amazing year, obviously, in 2023. And we are so excited to see what you do in 2024 and far beyond.
Well, I thank you very much for that. And I will say, again, when you get to that success, it's so often that you forget what got you here. But we go all the way back to Mary, right? My husband. And then, of course, ultimately God. And again, I don't say that lightly, because I've spent many, many nights on my face.
Yeah.
Can I do this, right? Can I do this? And God just continuing to lead me into this path. And, all glory, I will say, goes to God for sure.
Absolutely. Hopefully everyone listening is inspired to go be a Mary out there for somebody today. Irma, thanks again so much.
Thank you.
Listen to this interview and more on the Alliance Group podcast.